right, good morning, everyone. I am Melissa Davis. I am the Family and Provider Support Coordinator, and I am so pleased to be facilitating our community panel this year, and we're so thankful to Trisha, Emma, Alex, who's going to be up virtually on the screen, there she is, and Joe, who have volunteered their time to share with us today. Everyone's journey with FOP looks different, and I'm excited that our panelists can share their unique stories. Our theme for our community panel this year is planning, adapting, and finding support. In our conversation, we're going to explore adaptive equipment, independence, and the importance of support during transitions. If we don't have time for Q&A this morning, I encourage you to please seek out our panelists or contact Alex and have additional conversations with them. But I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves before we get started.
My name is Joe Hollywood.
Hi, my name is Trisha Wheelock. I'm mom to Lincoln Wheelock, who is 19 years old.
Hi, I'm Emma Albee.
Hi, I'm Alex.
Wonderful. So I want to start out today talking about adaptive equipment and independence. For all of you, what was a piece of equipment that made the biggest difference in your independence, and how did it change your day-to-day life? Joe, I know you recently just started driving. Can you tell us a little bit about that and that process?
I surprisingly did not need too much adaptive equipment for my car, but one thing that because I got a new car and it's has all the security features on it. But one thing that I definitely got was a steering wheel knob to make it easier to turn the wheel.
Yeah. And then, do you have anything else in your car that maybe was standard that came with it that you use?
Well, so I have blind spot cameras whenever I turn on a blinker, right? So I could see and especially if I'm changing lanes, so I could see what's coming up behind me. So because if I can't see.
And tell us a little bit about how driving has given you independence, and what places are you going and what things are you doing these days?
Well, as soon as I've just started college, I'm able to now drive myself back and forth from college. I could use my car to go out with my friends, so I haven't really done that yet.
Yeah. Wonderful. What about you, Emma? Can you share some experiences about your power chair or your wheelchair van?
Sure. So there's a lot of equipment I could talk about. So I have a power lift. Like you said, I have a wheelchair van, but I wanted to focus on my power wheelchair. So I just got a new one. The one I'm sitting in is a relatively old one because I didn't want to bring the new one because I flew here and I didn't want it to get damaged and then to have to use that chair for 5 more years. So I brought this old one, but as soon as I get home, I'm going to work on getting that new one, fitted to me and what I need. There's lots of little adjustments to make, and it takes a lot of time because I have to, sit in it for a while, say, oh no, I need the footrest, adjusted this way, do that, and then sit in it for another, good period of time and see how it works. So it's something that takes time. I kind of had a bad experience with the last wheelchair I got previous to that one. I, like a lot of us, have kind of unique needs, even compared to other people that use power wheelchairs. So when you go to get it fitted, a lot of times they're like, okay, so we'll do this and we'll do that like we do for everyone that uses a power chair, but that's not what worked for me. And I didn't know to advocate for myself really strongly and push. So then when I went for the fitting for the new chair I have, I really pushed and I'm like, I like this chair, please make one as close to this chair that works for me. And so a lot of times where I'm sitting, my center of gravity is not what they would prefer. So I'm like, no, this is what works for me. I feel comfortable in this chair. So please build it as close to this one as you can. And so that's what happened. But it took a lot of advocating and being like, no, this is what I want. This is what works, not that. And with the last one I had, I got Elevate so I could be raised up to be at eye level, but that added an inch to the seat. So then it was hard for me to get in and out of the chair. And so there's just a lot of little things that you have to think through. And it's really hard because you can't try out the chairs ahead of time because they're custom. So you can't think, well, let me see if this works. It's like, no, you get it and you can only make so many adjustments once you have the chair, and there's different kinds of chairs. It's almost like buying a car, but a car you can go test drive. You're like, nah, I don't really like how this one drives. Well, wheelchairs all drive differently too, but you can't test them out. So it's just really hard to know what you need, and so just advocating for yourself of what you would like and what works for you is really important.
And Emma, I know you said you were kind of reluctant to get a power chair at first. Can you share a little bit about that thought process and then how you've been happy that you did it and it got you, independence?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed when I was 9.5, and things progressed really quickly. So I was using a power chair within about a year. So I didn't have a whole lot of choice because I was 9.5, so I was old enough that I could use a power chair. And I, wanted as much independence as I could. I didn't want to have someone pushing me around at school or things like that. I wanted to be able to go where I wanted to go. So having that power chair gave me a little more independence, and that was really good.
Thanks, Emma. Alex, can you share with us about your outdoor lift experience?
Yes. So for the outdoor lift experience, it was definitely a long journey. As Emma mentioned, a lot of times it can't be just regular outdoor lift as you customly see them, because I couldn't bend my legs, so my legs were straight out, and a regular elevator wouldn't work. So I actually went through the Department of Human Services Rehabilitation Services, who worked with assistive technology. And along with my primary care physician and occupational therapist, they worked together, were able to find that it was a necessity. And I was given a budget of $25,000 within that 5-year period from the start, in which the state would cover the outdoor lift. But with my case, again, because it was special, assistive technology, they sent out an assistive technology professional, an occupational therapist, and an architect. They came to the house, they took measurements, took pictures, took videos, kind of saw how I sat in my chair. And as Emma mentioned, I have a power chair, so power chairs are heavy and big and a little bit obnoxious at times. So talking with them and exploring where in the property it would be proper to have the outdoor lift, but also that it had my needs. They were able to do 2 different blueprints, and based on the blueprints, I was able to choose which one I felt more comfortable. And so they customized an outdoor lift with the length that I needed so that I was able to get in the outdoor lift as comfortably as I was in my power chair. It took a little bit of a while, but the way that it worked is once you're approved through DHS, and you're given the budget, they have to choose 3 companies that are willing to do the job. And from those 3 companies, they choose the one that kind of charges the least amount. And then the process of construction begins. For me, it happened during the pandemic. So it happened when things were shutting down, and it wasn't as quick as it usually is because materials, companies weren't working, so it took a little bit longer. But that gave me the opportunity to get in and out of my house with the independence, because beforehand, I wasn't able to get out of the house. And the way that I would get out of the house was my stepdad would carry me down the stairs, and I transferred to a manual wheelchair. And then his work schedule didn't coordinate with my work. And eventually, I had to call the fire department to kind of help me do my work obligations and attend doctor's appointments. I don't know if you want me to talk about the fire department or leave that a little bit later.
Yes, please share about your fire department experience.
Oh, the fire department experience was actually thanks to my mom, because I had been kind of housebound for 4 months, without being able to get in or out of the house. And she was like, in an emergency, like if a fire or something happens, how are you supposed to get down? Like there has to be something. So she called the town and the suburb that we live in, calling like senior services and disability. And then she came to find out that the fire department actually has a lift assist program. And so the lift assist program has a number where you call the non-emergency dispatch number, and you tell them that you need a lift assist, and you provide them your address, and within maybe 3 to 8 minutes, either the paramedics will come or the firefighters, depending who's available. And actually, because of the outdoor lift, it took close to like 8 months for me to get the outdoor lift, and I was still going in office to work. So I would 2 times to up to 4 times a day. Um, at times, the paramedics come, and then there was twice where I had a fire truck go up, and like all my neighbors were like freaked out, thinking that something had happened. And I was like, no, they're here to take care of me. So it kind of, and then the fire department and the paramedic became kind of like family and friends to me because they gave me that independence that I needed to. So I was able to attend concerts, go to doctor's appointments, do my work obligations. So I don't know if every state, I'm assuming every state with should have licenses. I just don't know if it works. But at least I know in an emergency, if if the elevator breaks down, I know that I can call them and they could assist.
Absolutely, and how wise of your mom to find that resource. And we're thankful to have a FOP mom on our panel today. Trisha, can you share some things about the process of acquiring adaptive equipment for Lincoln and what you guys went through to find the right tools?
Sure. Parents out there, we have a hard job. 17 years ago, I was invited to join a party that I didn't really want to attend and didn't know I was going to get an invitation to. And yet here we are. And we have the great privilege and responsibility of advocating for our children and hopefully empowering them to be able to advocate for themselves. Lincoln is a kid who's opinionated. I'll tell you, he gets that from his father. You can ask him later. Lincoln did not want to use adaptive equipment. He was resistant at many stages and many steps, and I tried to balance out what I thought was the right thing with what he wanted. He also, as a I don't know if this is just being a teen or a dude, when he decided he wanted something, he just assumed it could happen for him immediately, not recognizing, whoa, this might take 6 to 9 months. So balancing all of those things could be a challenge. When he started high school, he needed to use a wheelchair, but he didn't want to have a power chair. Unlike you, Emma, he wanted someone to push him everywhere he went. And so we always started things slow. And I went to Easter Seals and asked for help to get a rental wheelchair because it cost $100 and it was a permanent rental. That was the first step. And then we could move on to the next step of getting a custom manual chair. He wasn't ready for that right away, but when he was, we started the next step, and so on and on. Lincoln's a freshman in college this year. The summer before his senior year, I started to say, well, is mom gonna push you when you go to class? You know, when you go to college, am I gonna push you to your classes, or is grandpa? Well, no, he didn't like that idea. So I said, well, we probably are gonna have to get a power chair. As Emma mentioned, you know, insurance companies, that can be hard to navigate all those things. And there was a box and a system they wanted us to follow, and Lincoln did not want to follow that box. He had an opinion about what he wanted and what he wanted it to feel like, and that took quite a few visits, and it took asking different people. It took asking for help from a lot of different resources. And we did finally get what he wanted. What he ended up wanting was his manual chair, turned into a power chair, because he liked the seat. It felt comfortable. It wasn't as large or heavy. It didn't require us to buy a brand new van to be able to accommodate that. That was the right next step for him. And so for us, we've just tried to balance out anticipating Lincoln's needs and giving him agency to decide what he wants, when he wants it, recognizing he'll make that decision at the last minute and expect us to work a small miracle, so being prepared for that. But he is doing great, and I'm so thankful for the wisdom of the people in this room who've shared their stories with us and their expertise.
Thanks so much. And Alex kind of touched on our next question about what to do when equipment or accommodations or your plans fail. Having the fire department lift service as a backup if your outdoor lift isn't working is a great example. Joe or Trisha or Emma, do any of you have an example or a tip for the audience on how you've handled something when a piece of equipment you thought was going to work didn't work, or it broke, or how you handle your unique needs that don't always work with an off-the-shelf object?
I can start. So several years ago, I fell a couple times while I was transferring. So I wanted to start the process of getting a power lift so that if I needed that in the future, I would have it, because like a lot of us have said, everything takes a while. So you can't think, okay, I need it tomorrow, and then you're gonna get it tomorrow. So I wanted to start that process so when I needed it, hopefully I would have it. And it took a year and a half probably for me to get what I needed. And so just being, I think a lot of us FOPers are stubborn. We know what we would like and what we need to continue doing what we want to do, and you have to stick with it. You have to keep pushing, keep asking the right people. So I had to talk with my doctor multiple times, who then would talk to other people and then would get back to me and say, nope, this isn't going to work. So now what are we going to do? And then you would start something else. And so I had to just keep with it. I actually went to Advanced Seating and Mobility, which is where I got my power chair, because they also sell the lifts. And talked with them, and it was like, what do I do? It's from someone who sells these. You have to get all the different opinions of, well, how do I get insurance to cover this? Will insurance cover this? What do they cover? How long will it take? Who needs to put in the order? And then it would come down to, I got the local nursing association to come, but to get them to come, there had to be certain words in the prescription for insurance to cover it. And so it's like, what are those words? I would talk to the nursing association. Then I would call my doctor. Then my doctor would talk to the nursing association. And it would just be this circle around and around. And of course, waiting for phone calls, waiting for someone to call back, getting to the right person. So just being stubborn and sticking with it. So then the nursing association came to my house. A PT and an OT came. And it was really, really helpful to have someone in the home that could look at my situation, watch me transfer, think, well, maybe this would work. What about that? Let's look this up online. Let's watch this video. Do you think this would work? And so it was just really helpful to have them, but it just took a really long time to get the answer. And then in the end, it turned out that they had exactly what I needed in their loan equipment closet. And it was something the insurance would have covered, or wouldn't have covered, because it was a power lift, and insurance only covers manual, which I feel would be scary because someone else is in control, and I like to be in control of the situation as much as I can be. And so it was almost like it was meant to be, that it worked out that way, but it just took a lot of sticking with it and pushing at the right people and asking questions.
Stuff is going to fail. That's a for sure. And I do not have the skill set to fix a single thing. And so I need people. My spouse fixes everything. If you do not have someone in your life to fix stuff, you got to find that person. The great marathon runner, Eliud Kipchoge from Kenya, was once asked, "What's the secret of your success?" And he said, it's simple. I never run alone. I cannot help Lincoln. I cannot help him run this race alone. I have got to have a big support team, my family, our friends, our faith community, our medical community, our school community, on and on. I have to have people to be able to help us to do these things, because I can't solve problems. I'm not a troubleshooter with mechanical items, no. And so you got to find those people who are going to help you, because stuff is going to fail. You're going to make a room reservation at a hotel. You're going to plan to go somewhere. It's not going to be accessible. You're going to have to figure out plan B, C, D. And I think what Emma talked about is having perseverance, grit, and being resilient. And that's one of the best things about FOP folks is they are resilient and they persevere. And that's a great thing.
I really can't think, but maybe my mom could think of something. I don't know.
You know what, Joe is, you know,
Mike,
he wants to do something.
There's a mic right there.
They're usually so loud, people don't need a microphone. You know, we, to what Emma and Trish said, we kind of like to think ahead of time and, you know, how can we make this happen? And in Joe's case, because he is mobile, what's the most safe and most comfortable way? And you kind of need to think of what can go wrong. What I can tell you about Joe, if he wants to do something, he figures it out. And, you know, he wanted to go to college, he wanted to drive. I'm like, okay, so he wanted to do it on his own. He had a power for 12 years through his, you know, school, and he wanted to go independently. So, you know, we scope it out. We help him, we helped him find, you know, ways to travel safely on the campus. Driving is stressful for any parent, so it doesn't matter. It's still stressful. But there's a lot of tools out there, and there's a lot of services, and it's really, as Trish said, it's, you know, advocating for your child when they're younger. But I think the most important thing on our FOP journey is from the time Joe was, you know, diagnosed. We took him with us. He was part of us advocating for him, and he now, you know, he's on his first panel by himself. You know, listen, mom and dad step in when he needs us, but I think it's really important that you have to help them help themselves, and help them find their resources, because it makes them more comfortable, makes them more independent, and it makes them feel safer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Suzanne. And all of you in some way touched on being active in your communities. And so I kind of want to segue to that. And I'd love for you all to share about how being proactive and advocating for your needs and finding the right equipment has helped you participate in activities. I have a very active group up here. So Joe, can you talk a little bit about orchestra or film club?
Well, starting like 5th grade, I had the option to take either band or orchestra, and I chose to play, of course, the second largest instrument. I chose to play the cello. And it's, you know, obviously, you know, that's to rest on your body, right? So originally I didn't use like a regular cello. I used an electric cello that's like, it stands on its own. So like kind of like some sort of tripod. It's like a very slim body. But starting in high school, because my high school was very large, and I couldn't just carry a cello every day back and forth to school and drop it off in the room because I had to go to classes. So eventually I came back to a regular acoustic cello that was actually just stayed in the school because it belonged to the schools. And eventually I was like, yeah, this is fine. But I always had like some sort of like, not a full-size cello, but like a smaller one. We're kind of like looking into, and then going into high school, I was part of my school's TV station. And I mostly worked like behind in all technical aspects. But then starting like junior year, I was on the news show, but obviously my mom and my aide didn't want me missing any classes, so I had to choose when I could go during like classes that I did not mind missing, like start a gym or like start of a study hall. And then going into college, actually, I became part of the film club, and we go all over the campus, filming in different locations, like in like a gym, the gym basement, because there's like multiple floors. And I'll they know like obviously because I have my backpack, so I will take they'll wait for me like outside the building, and I'll like take the elevator down.
And you'll see Joe around this weekend too. He's helping doing some of our production and videoing, so you'll see him working as well. Alex, can you tell us a little bit about your college experience and being active in sorority life and campus clubs?
Yeah, so I agree. FOP patients were very stubborn, and when I went to college, I wanted to be independent as well, kind of be free-spirited and figure it out on my own. I luckily was able to find a great group of friends that made it easy. As Suzanne Jones mentioned, having a PA or a professional. I actually had a PA even in college, but the difference from like grade school and high school to college, in grade school and high school, I didn't get to choose who was my PA. But when it came to college, I was able to choose who it was, and I was able to choose a college age, whether it was a woman or a man, but they were my age, they were in college, we had classes together. So it wasn't like the outsider kind of aspect of like the big elephant in the room that everyone saw and you would feel awkward. Because in college, you want to be independent. So the fact that I was able to have that control and I would set my boundaries of like, okay, give me my space, help me with this, but when I'm doing like group projects, like stand back a little bit. But in college, I was very active on campus. I was in a sorority. I think my sorority also kind of pushed me out of my shell, in which I became even more involved in other groups like dance marathons. I had positions of like director on campus, and I wasn't living on campus. I was actually commuting back and forth from home to college, but I literally spent my whole day on campus. And I had lockers throughout campus. So I had a locker in one building where I would be able to leave all my personal items that I would need for the day. So let's say if I had class from 8, but I knew I was going to be on campus until 7 p.m., I would have everything in that locker. And my friends would assist me and help me, and they had apartments. So if it didn't work there, I could go to their apartments. But I think also working with the Department of Disability within campus, I was very lucky that I was able to have all the accommodations that I needed freely. And I got really along with the staff and the directors. So they were really nice and kind of helped me work out with professors and classes. And I was able to have all my classes be in the same building or even in the same room so I wouldn't have to transition from point A to point D. So doing that running around. But I think I got that full independence journey and I got to experience what it was living on campus, even though I didn't live on campus. And I think I've always been the type of person that I never sugarcoat that I have FOP. I kind of just explain it to people. I'm like, I do things a little bit different. I'm not afraid to ask for help. I've gone to the store, and if I can't reach anything and I'm by myself, I'll go up to a stranger. I'm like, hi, excuse me, can you do me a favor? Can you pass me this? I can't reach. And I think that's part of just kind of learning and rolling with the punches, which at first is terrifying. And I'm not gonna lie, I had panic attacks the first few times that I had to talk to professors or explain certain things, like needing the pillow, needing an extra locker, having to leave class early, or things like that. It was kind of iffy. I think what helped for me was my mom included me from a young age in the IEPs, where I was able to learn to advocate for myself. So since age 14, I kind of started to advocate. So by the time I got to college, it was kind of like a piece of cake.
Thank you, Alex. Emma, can you share a little bit about working as a scorekeeper and how that kept you involved in sports and living in a college dorm?
Yes, so all throughout high school and college, I was a scorekeeper for the softball teams. And so it made it so I felt like I was part of a team. I was able to be involved in sports. And I traveled to like half of the away games. I didn't go to all of them because it was a little much, but I really enjoyed taking score. And so when I was in high school, I had first wanted to be the scorekeeper for basketball because I had done that in middle school as well. And so when I asked, the coach actually cornered me in the hallway because he was a teacher as well. And he said that they had to offer that to the people who tried out and didn't make the team first. So there was no space for me. So I was pretty upset, but I kind of rolled with it. But then when it came time to softball, which really was my passion more than basketball, I was proactive. I learned from that situation. So I went to the meetings. Like in college, when we had freshman orientation or some of those first meetings, I went right to the softball meeting. I went just with everyone else that wanted to try out and join the team. And I said, I would like to take score. And I started right from the beginning. So there was no way for them to say, well, we didn't know. We have to offer it to these other people first. And it worked out really well. And so I score kept all through high school for varsity softball, and then in college for the softball team. And I just really enjoyed it. I got to be part of a team. I traveled with the team, which was a little tricky because using a wheelchair, my mom would come with us. We would have bus troubles. We would have people like pushing on the lift, and the lift wouldn't come out, and all of these things. But it still was a really enjoyable situation, and I felt like I was part of a group.
Thanks, Emma. And I know, Tricia, you have a very musical family, and Lincoln and his brother have had some big adventures with the marching band. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, surprisingly enough, Lincoln did not want to do high school band. I made him do middle school band. He played baritone, and as FOP progressed, that was just not going to be an option for him to carry a baritone. And he started 9th grade, and I said, oh, you're going to do band. You can take it for the first 2 weeks, and if you really hate it, then we'll talk about it. And he fell in love with band, and he fell in love with the kids and the experience, and he found a place to belong. It became so important meeting those other kids. We live in Des Moines. Lincoln attended one of the biggest high schools in our state, so it was a gigantic school. By the time he graduated, every person at the high school knew him. Tons of people he didn't know knew him, in part because of the activities he did. He did marching band, he did concert band, he played in percussion ensemble. He and his brother convinced me that they were going to go on the spring break trip with the band. They went to Disney World, and he was in the Disney World parade, and he refused to let his own mother attend. Instead, his aide graciously rode a bus for 26 hours each way with high school kids and pushed him through 5 theme parks so that he could do Disney World. I can't say enough about having good people to support you and to support your kid. Lincoln had the same aide from kindergarten through senior year of high school, and that made such a tremendous difference. She was absolutely incredible, and the person who told me to do that was right over there, Margie McWilliams. Before Lincoln started kindergarten, I talked to Margie on the phone, and she said, make sure you get Lincoln an aide, argue with the people at school, make sure he gets a good program, and you get him a good aide. And I listened to you, Margie. And Lincoln's experience was so good because of it. After, she pushed him. She went to kindergarten on the first day of school, and she pushed him across the stage when he graduated last May. That is incredible. When he was going to college this fall, he wanted to do band, and the big question was, this is going to be so weird. Mrs. Morales is not going to be with you. And I was nervous, but Lincoln was not. He was ready. We met Mrs. Morales in August. She went back to school and was complaining she was assigned to this new kid that was not nearly as easy and good-natured as Lincoln, and she was going to have to work a lot harder this year. And we had such a good relationship, but she did so many things for him, helping him learn to advocate for himself. So here he went off to college, not that same person there day to day, and yet he did it. He's joined the band. He's in band at college. He's a business major. I, of course, wanted to walk with him to all of his classes to make sure, do you know the route? Are you going to get there? How are you going to get to the cafeteria? I was told no. He has found a way, and that's what's so amazing about our kids, is that they find a way.
Absolutely, and I think asking for and accepting help is a big part of that transition, and all of these fine people up here have transitioned to college, and so I'd like them to talk a little bit about having to take on that role for themselves and ask for and accept help. Joe, can you talk a little bit about your recent transition to college and working with your professors?
Yeah, well, obviously I also had an aide going through grade school. Like I had the same aide from like 3rd to 12th grade, and she knew me so well. And earlier she there to help me and obviously protect me. But as grade school went on, she kind of backed away. She was more just to protect me. And obviously she was with the district. She couldn't follow me into college. So I was eventually she also taught me to advocate for myself, but I had to do this all on my own. So leading up to college, I actually met with what my college's accessibility center, right? And we talked over what I need, preferential seating in the front so I could hear better, right? Being able to, because obviously I can't write that. I have the worst handwriting, but being able to type out notes, And you know, at the end, eventually he gave me all these letters to send out to emails to my professors. And if I needed to talk to my professor about something, I'd go up to their desk and say, like, hey, right, like I take an acting class, and the first day of or maybe first or second day of acting class, I walked up to my professor and said, hey, I have a condition. I might not be able to do like if we're doing a lot of movement, I might not be able to do everything. And he said, yeah, no, that's fine. Obviously, driving was another big thing. So the first couple days, either one of my parents sat in the car with me as I drove myself there, or and one of them followed me home. And unfortunately, because I have night classes, my mom was super adamant on making sure that somebody was here to drive home with me. But eventually, we just turned into like I FaceTime, like my dad said, hey, I'm getting out, and I just drive myself home. What else?
Did it make you feel nervous to have to approach your professors yourself and manage that after having your parents help you?
I mean, a little bit, and also I might have forgotten at some point, but it was like a little worrying. Like, oh, okay, and especially like also just in general, I might ask for like help. Like if I can't reach a plate in the lunchroom, like there's somebody nearby. It's like, hey, can you help me get this?
And I think you're lucky you've got a big group of friends that you've had for a long time. How do you approach asking for help with your friends and in your friend group?
Well, obviously I have friends that have known me for forever, and they know like what I can and can't do. And actually, one of my friends, is like he's a lifeguard, so he's certified. So if I need that type of help, he can help. But also, I also have a lot of friends I met at the TV station that actually. One of them followed me into college, so we'll hang out so he knows if I need help.
Awesome. And Emma, I know you lived in the college dorms and managed all of your own, hiring your care attendants and being independent in that way. Can you share about that experience?
Yes, so for all 4 years of my college, I lived on campus, and so I had to hire caregivers to help me. So it was a learning process. The first semester, my mom lived with me in my dorm room, which was kind of a bummer, but it worked. And so we kind of just were trying to figure out, of course there was a lot of changes, being in a different environment, having, going to classes and figuring all that out, and then also figuring out all the caregiver stuff, how to hire, how to manage, what happens when I have problems with caregivers, and all of that. And so it just took us a bit of time. She was out in the community, of course, during the day while I was in classes. So she made some connections, and that just slowly ballooned into, I would hire like 6 to 8 caregivers each year. Some of them would come back year after year. Others would graduate and move on or be at the other campus, so it was harder for them to work for me. And it helped that the school I was at had an OT program, pre-med, med school, PT, so it looked really good on their resume. So I think that made it easier to hire people because it benefited both of us, which was really nice. And they were really good caregivers because they kind of understood more than just the general public because they were already in like the OT framework. And I learned a lot on how to advocate for myself. So I had to advertise, interview with these people, hire them, and then manage the caregivers, all while taking a full load of classes. And I was pre-med, so I had a lot of lab classes, and it was a lot. I would have to make sure, I would have 2 hours between class, and I would have to get back to my dorm room, make sure that someone was going to be there, could help me with what I needed, and then get back to class. And then I would have to schedule everything so that I knew I had coverage when I needed it, and if someone was sick, who could back up, who was in class, who was away. There was a lot to it, but I enjoyed it. I like organizing things. I think that's one of the things that I'm good at, and so it was really nice to be able to organize a schedule, and they all showed up. I don't know that there was ever a time that people didn't show up, and I knew who I could call if I needed help. And so it was a lot of work, but it was really nice, and a lot of them were my friends. That was a lot of the people I would see, and so we would go to dinner together or different things, and so it was just a really nice group of people.
Thanks, Emma. Alex, I know you have a lot of experience in the workplace as your career, in your career as a counselor. Can you talk with us a little bit about workplace accommodations and what it was like when you transitioned into your power wheelchair while working?
So I guess I could talk about accommodations, and then the wheelchair one was a big one. So from the beginning, with internships, every time I had an interview, I would always go straight forward, answer their questions, but in the end, I would always bring up, how do you work with accommodations? Are you willing to accommodate? And I would already have a list of what accommodations I needed. So when I was able-bodied, the only accommodation I needed was I couldn't walk long distances. I couldn't raise my hands, so if there was a cabinet file, it needed to be on the lower end. I needed to have a locker. I needed a specific desk chair and a wireless keyboard. So it was like very minimal. But at every interview that I had, I would always bring it up and kind of see how they would respond. And most of the time, it was very positive, and they would be willing to work with it. I always had contact not only with whatever supervisor or director was in charge, but I also maintained contact with HR, human resources, because at the end, human resources was the one that had the contract, and they were the ones that were hiring and doing the background check. So always making sure that everyone was in the same picture and doing everything that we needed. In my experience, I've never had an issue. I've requested things in the work place in my last job. The office was not wheelchair accessible, so I couldn't work in office. I worked directly with the director in HR and my supervisor, along with other managers, and they actually went above and beyond and actually spent. They did automatic doors, not only in the back door, but in the front entrance. The office that I had, they actually put an automatic door as well. They had a doorbell ringer. In case I needed something, I would ring that doorbell, and I would let reception know that I needed something. Um, they even provided like the wireless keyboard, a laptop, a wireless phone, even for emergencies that like when you in the workforce, you never know if there's going to be a fire, and depending on how the building is, you might have an easier access, or sometimes you might not have an easier access. So for tornadoes or fire, you had to go down the steps, and I was kind of stuck. So what they did, they gave me a window breaker, and it was very lightweight, and you would just hit the window a little bit, and it would crack. And they're like, if you have to break the window, just break it and get out. But when I became a wheelchair user, it was very tough, just because I didn't have my power wheelchair and I was using a manual wheelchair. So I would take to work my mom. So my mom would go to work with me. And at the beginning, my job didn't like the fact that my mom was going into the office with me, because they saw it as a confidential situation. And she didn't have a background check, and they didn't know who she was. And when I explained the situation, they were like, yeah, we understand, but we need to run a background check. And I was like, she doesn't work for you. You guys don't have a contract. She's like, I would say she would be my employee, because I wouldn't say she's my mom directly, because they had no business knowing that it was my mom, to kind of keep that professional. So they were very adamant, and they were very pushy to run a background check and not letting her in the office. So one thing that I did was, okay, you're not going to let her, then I can't come to work. I can't do this. And because I wasn't able to fulfill those needs, they actually hired another person to do the same role that I was doing. So they had two people doing the same role, but they wouldn't take my mom in the office. So what I did, I contacted HR, sent them the letter. I contacted the union. I also spoke to my supervisor and the director, and that was still kind of iffy. So I took it up a notch, and I went to equal opportunity. And equal opportunity is when there's discrimination or accommodations aren't being met. And so I brought in emails, I brought in all the evidence, because leading to me going in office in a wheelchair, I had the flare up and I had taken FMLA, and the office was not accommodated. They needed to fix the doors, the elevators, and they were taking too long. And because of that, they wanted to terminate me, but I still was under FMLA, and while you're under FMLA, they can't fire you. So I contacted ADA, and ADA actually has an extension. So if you do take FMLA and due to disability, you need an extension on that, they give you 2 months additionally. So under the ADA Act, I was able to extend my FMLA for another month while I was working with Equal Opportunity, HR, and the union, trying to coordinate my rights as a worker and being able to have the accommodations that the office needed, but also needing a personal assistant. Because my mom wasn't intervening, she was just bringing me in the office, pushing me in a manual wheelchair, bringing everything that I needed, and then she would walk out of the office and I would text her and be like, I gotta go to the bathroom, or I gotta go to another office. And that was it. So it's challenging, but never take no for an answer. You need to know your rights. Just because a lot of times they want to take advantage of it, and it's not fair. So I could go more in depth, but if anyone has questions, feel free to reach out, ask Hope or Melissa for my contact, 'cause I could go on and on.
Thank you, Alex. And Alex is an amazing example of an advocate, because having FOP makes you, have to develop those skills, and all of the people on the stage can do that. Tricia, we have a lot of elementary school and middle school parents here with us this weekend. Can you share a little bit about connecting with your local school and the moms in your community, and how that helped advocate for Lincoln and get you, what you needed?
There's so many things that I didn't know about FOP or services available to me. And I always wanted to find somebody who did know. I remember we live in Iowa, and there was a Medicaid option and a waiver option, but I didn't know how to fill out those forms or which one to apply for. And so Lincoln has a brother who's a year younger, and there was another mom at the school who was a social worker. And I took her for lunch at Panera, and she helped me fill out the forms and tell me, this is the waiver you should apply for. Because I didn't know which one would be the right one, but she did. And so for the cost of one lunch at Panera, and that it was going to take a couple of years. We were going to have to wait to go through the approval process. And she said to me, even if you don't need it right now, you should apply for it. Well, I never thought about that. And that turned out to be so helpful in getting services for Lincoln, in additional coverage, in just helping us navigate through the process. And so finding somebody who knows what they're doing and can help you figure that out is so important. That was with health insurance and a waiver. In terms of getting help at the school, I didn't know anything about special ed programs, except I knew my kid wasn't going to be in special ed in a basement somewhere. And so I wanted to have help. Do we get an IEP? Do we get a 504? What does that look like? So I went and made friends with people who did know and could help me and along the journey. And I think, as you've heard from a lot of people up here, to get the things your kids need is going to take some work on your part. It's probably not going to be one ask or two asks. You're not going to have to talk, you're not going to just talk to one person. But if you keep asking, very often it will happen. Not all the time, but very often it will. FOP mom Amanda Callie told me when Lincoln was diagnosed that he would bring out the best in other people. And that has really been true in so many cases. There have been so many people who have been willing to help us and have helped us along the journey. It's being persistent and finding those people and knowing that this can be overwhelming. You might get a lot of new information in the next few days. You got to take things at your pace, at what you can absorb. When I first met Marilyn Hare and Rick Steele all those years ago, I was not ready to hear all the things they had to tell me about what it meant to have a child with FOP. That seemed so scary and so different from my little 2.5-year-old. Of course, they were right about all the things they told me. All those things did come in time, but I didn't have to hear it all at that moment. There was a pace, and there was a time that I could discern that was going to be right. And so if you need to take a little extra time, that's okay. You don't have to join every group right away. You don't have to participate in everything right away. This is a life-changing diagnosis, and it is a lifetime journey. We have to pace ourselves in order to be able to do this and to do it well.
Thank you so much, Tricia, and thank you to all of our panelists. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. If there are any questions from the room, there's a mic here in the center, or we can bring you one if you have a question.
I don't really get that credit. I just have a sassy kid. I wanted to steamroll over everything, and he wanted to make his own decisions and do his own thing. And in the end, my spouse would just elbow me in the ribs and say, "Lady, be quiet. Listen to our kid. This is what he wants. Let him go after it. Let him make some mistakes. Let him do some things that you know are maybe not the best choice, but he's going to learn from that."
Hey, everybody. I am curious from our people with FOP here. You've told a lot of great stories about what it was like growing up with this condition. Is there anything that you wish you'd had done differently? And I'm specifically thinking about your parents. I'm a parent myself. Are there things like your parents wanted to do that you really were like against for any reason, that like we wouldn't recognize it because we don't have FOP? So I don't know, just anything, any advice for us parents who are navigating this?
Right. I can't think of any, like, one experience, but I think, like Tricia said, just listen to your kid. Push them and push them to learn to advocate for themselves, because that's really important, and it's really hard to learn how to do it. And so I think if you can, be a good example to your kid and advocating for them, and they can learn from you. But then you need to know when to step back, like Tricia said, when to let them make a mistake. Hopefully it's not a life-changing mistake, but we all need to make mistakes and learn from them and move on and make better decisions.
I mean, I have to agree, because I've definitely made some really dumb mistakes. Like picking up my classes. I made the horrible mistake of choosing a class that gets out at 9 o'clock at night, and choosing a very hard American government class. Like, because I was obviously so used to, back in high school, my parents were like literally right next to me picking out classes on like the website. But for college, I was at an orientation, and they came with me, but they were in a separate room. They took all of us to a different building, and like we were all in a room registering for our classes.
I think very quickly, I think parents sometimes want to be overprotective and are afraid to kind of let go of the reins a little bit. But sometimes you have to, because if you don't do it at a young age, the older you get, the harder it becomes. I know for a fact my mom always kind of pushed me, but she kind of knew when to let go. And when it was becoming overwhelming, she kind of stepped back and was like, she'll do it on her own terms, on her own time. So just be on the lookout for those signs of distress of where, like, rather than doing a positive thing or a good thing and it's affecting them, maybe not doing it until they're ready for it.
And like my aide, like back in like high school, like she was like very tough on me being very independent. She's like, Joe, you gotta advocate for yourself, right, remember? Yeah, like, and my parents were also like that too, but she did it the most.
And I know, Alex, you did some counseling when you were in your younger years to help you learn some of those skills. Do you want to share about that experience?
Yeah, so I actually, because when FOP started, I was 10 years old. So it was very new to me, and I was having constant flare-ups and a lot of physical changes. I went from being a very active kid and doing sports to not being able to do sports. So with those changes, my mom decided that I needed to go to therapy. And at first I was like, it's crazy people. I don't need therapy. I'm good. But then as I went to therapy, I started to realize that, yeah, there was a lot of things I needed to work on. And because of flare-ups I was having, there was physical changes, the way I walked, the way I looked, and being a child, like kids would make fun of you, like, haha, you have a hump on your back. And that would be hurtful. And I was always a shy kid. And the more the flare-ups became, the more timid and the more I got in my shell was like, don't talk to me. Like, I would get red as a tomato. I wouldn't talk, I would be soft-spoken. And doing therapy kind of helped you build that confidence, build that self-esteem. And she would push me and would be like, okay, we're gonna go around the office and you're gonna talk to my colleague and you're gonna ask them how their day was. And she would put challenges on me every week. And it sounds bad, but well, I don't know if it's bad, but I did therapy for like 12 years because there was a lot going on, not only with FOP, but family wise and self esteem and confidence. And I think therapy for me really helped shape the person that I am today because I am able to advocate. I feel confident. My self esteem is very, very good, where like I've challenged myself to do beauty contests. Uh, which I never thought that I would do. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna sign up as a joke. And then when I got the call, they're like, you're accepted. Crap, what am I gonna do now? Um, so I did therapy for 12 years from age 10 up to like 23 when I was a sophomore in college. And I think it really, really helped me that I ended up being a counselor myself as a professional. So don't be afraid and don't take the stigma that mental health is bad. Going to therapy to work on self-esteem, confidence, learning boundaries, learning how to schedule, to not challenge yourself because we are stubborn. And like Joe mentioned, when I was in college, I wanted to eat the world. And my first semester, I signed up for 8 classes. And by like the third week, I was done. I was crying all the time. Like, why did I do this to myself? I didn't want to graduate early. This is too much. And I ended up dropping 2 classes. Just staying at 6 was still way too overwhelming. So I think learning those boundaries is like, it's okay to push yourself, but learning when to stop and not eat the whole cake, but eat it little by little. It's more enjoyable.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I think Clive has one more question for us.
So I'm curious about what suggestions you have for folk when you're transitioning from pediatric to adult care, both medical and dental.
So Clive asked for your experiences and advice in transitioning from a pediatric care provider to an adult care provider, either dentist or medical.
I unfortunately would not have too much knowledge on, however, because I've gone to the exact same pediatrician since I was a kid, and I did have like one set doctor, but he retired recently, so I think my parents are planning on, I'm planning on going to see theirs, right? Right?
Well, I can just tell you, with Joe, because he participates in a trial and whatnot, he turned 18 in June, so now we have him, like, I know, I always think I'm like so loud. Now that he turned 18, any correspondence that comes to me, I forward to him, and I have him speak to, we'll help him, but I have him speak to the doctors, I have him check himself in, he fills out all of his own forms. I think that as FOP parents, we automatically just did it for them, but he's an adult. So I now, with him, and we're there to guide him, and with, the medical professionals that we have, I take their recommendations, very seriously, like for next steps. I don't know if that answered your question. And we're lucky with our FOPs, doctors, that we can just stay with them.
The dental thing is something we're struggling with. I listened to your presentation and I wrote down some notes about things because Lincoln is 19 and he saw a pediatric dentist, and that they informed me they'd like him to transition on. And so that is a concern that we have.
Like Joe, I don't really have much experience with that because even though I'm in my 30s, I still go to the same doctor's office and dentist. I live in, pretty rural on an island off the coast of Maine, so I don't have a whole lot of options. So the doctor I go to sees, I think, from babies, to everyone. So I don't have much experience with that.
I think very quickly it's tough finding the right doctor. I actually had to transition from pediatrics to adults, and it was very scary starting from zero. But I think my mom and I, we did our research on the doctors and finding what we were looking for and if they were willing to learn about FOP. And luckily, we were able to find the right doctor. But it is scary having to re-explain FOP, the do's and don'ts, and who to contact. But I think for me, I've maintained all my doctors in one location so that they could all communicate in the event an emergency happens. They're just one click away from each other. But it's tough, it's scary.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you to my whole panel. Before we cover a couple of housekeeping items, could everybody give these people a nice round of applause?